Take a ship, advise the travel folders, and many people do. Once it was by necessity, today it's by choice. The Ellinis steams through the lower reaches of the South Pacific, her course set for Tahiti. For the first lap of her voyage, she's quiet, as her passengers become acquainted with her and with each other, and reacquainted with the luxury of uninterrupted sleep. For 4 days, the ship cuts her way through lazy seas and placid weather until suddenly the passengers recreate the feel of Tahiti with a show of their own, but a little practice has been put in first. The Ellinis is at the equator, and King Neptune boards her with his court to present the customary challenge to those who cross his domain. In a solemn ceremony steeped in centuries of dignified tradition, selected passengers reverently submit to the stately initiation to the mystic order of the deep. Those whose natural awe inhibits their participation, members of Neptune's court gently demonstrate the simplicity of the initiation rites. It appears that on this voyage His Majesty has a little time to spare. And later, well pleased with the day's recruitment of subjects, he attends a show in his honor, put on by the passengers' children. For King Neptune, this is the end of another routine mission. But as someone remarked later, it was with a slight smile of satisfaction that he slid over the side to return to his ocean kingdom. The voyage across the Pacific is nearly over. Ahead lie the Americas and the Panama Canal. It's a dull, hot day as the Ellinis enters the canal at Balboa on the Pacific side. In all, she has 50 miles of canal territory to pass through, and the transit will take around 9 hours. The first locks are at Miraflores. Here and in the next set of locks she'll be raised to a height of 85 feet above sea level. When she's safely inside the giant lock chamber, the water level rises to bring the ship up to the level of the next section of the canal. The water's gravity fed through the large tunnels into the bottom of the chamber. Electric locomotives called mules tow each ship through the locks. But through the open sections of the canal, the Ellinis will move under her own steam. Years ago, mariners and merchantmen dreamt of the possibility of building a waterway through the Panama Isthmus, the narrow neck of land that joins the American continents. But it wasn't until 1880 that the first work began under the leadership of the man who built the Suez Canal. The canal was finally finished by the United States in 1914. The Panama Canal is still one of the world's largest engineering feats. The construction originally regarded by many as being impossible. The Gaillard Cut was carved through 8 miles of rugged hills that were a section of America's continental divide. During construction, it was known as the Big Ditch. The weather's hot and humid as the Ellinis reaches the halfway point, and precisely on 2 o'clock it begins to rain. surface dotted with flying fish and its weather warm and dry. Ahead lie the islands in the Netherlands Antilles, not far off the coast of Venezuela. First to appear is Aruba, an island that seems to be covered with oil refineries. Curacao is the island where the Ellinis will make her Caribbean stopover. It's a good opportunity to send one of the ship's lifeboats in ahead on a test run. Is the capital of Curacao. Its brightly painted Dutch buildings mark the island's long history of Dutch colonization. Today it stands an independent member of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Ellinis means young Greek maiden, a fitting name for a ship whose graceful lines shine as she enters the fifth busiest port in the world. Behind the ship closes the famous floating bridge, a road bridge that joins the two halves of the city. Hinged at one end, it moves like a giant door floating on pontoons. The passengers find Willemstad surprisingly clean for such a busy port. Its streets are spotless. Much trade goes on in the shops along them, for Willemstad is almost completely a duty-free port. There's much to catch the eye in the way of unusual souvenirs. Highest point above Willemstad is Port Nassau, where a magnificent bar and restaurant look over the city and the oil refineries that are Curaçao's lifeblood. The weather's almost intoxicating in its fresh warmth, a heat which is a welcome change from the humidity of Panama. By night, the oil flares glow continuously, answered by the lights of the bars, restaurants and shops in the streets below. The Caribbean lies astern. Ahead is Southampton, and the twin screws of the Ellinis bite into the Atlantic at a steady 20 knots. For the crew, work goes on as usual. Lifeboats are checked and the ship is continuously repainted. An all-white vessel's a difficult one to maintain if it's going to keep up a fresh appearance. For the passengers, life has settled itself into some sort of pattern, exciting, lazy or indifferent, but seldom boring. New friends have been made, in some cases a great many. Always a popular meeting place is the smoke room bar, for a drink before dinner, or after dinner, or any time. Among the selection of beers and spirits and cocktails, many like to try the famous Greek drink, ouzo. And sooner or later, many get the urge to try something else. Like a good dinner, perhaps. There seems to be something in what they say about the sea developing a good appetite. There's damsels from Damascus, slave girls from Sicily, and archbishops and Romans and heads of state. And there's a proud pair of parents on an Alka holiday. Exotic maids to confused cowboys, everyone goes through their paces for the judges. Will award the prizes. Despite the medical reports, first prize goes to a king-size cigarette, without the filter, please. Presentations over, the ball swings on in festive mood as chics shake and Romans rock. But the voyage across the Atlantic's coming to an end, and many are preparing to disembark. A radio telegram may perhaps arrange a meeting place for friends or relatives. The internal telephone system's forever busy, and it's an easy way of contacting friends throughout the ship for a small end-of-voyage cabin party. conversation turns to incidents that have happened throughout the past few weeks. Wasn't it funny when... And remember the night... All the little episodes that weren't always funny at the time, but afterwards seemed so amusing. Many new friends have been made. Some will never see each other again, and others, well, perhaps they'll stay together a little longer. It's a chill wind and a traditional channel fog that greets the ELLINIS as she arrives at Southampton. Sure signs of home for some. For others, it's the first taste of a new life. But not all will be leaving the ship on the shores of merry England. Some will be going on to Athens as she returns to the Antipodes, this time via the Mediterranean and the Suez Canal. It's an exciting moment for those returning home. But there are some whose future depends on the next few months in a new land. Suddenly, many feel a certain regret at leaving behind the carefree security of life aboard the ELLINIS. Passengers disembark to be replaced by new ones. Thousands of pieces of luggage are transferred back and forth, new supplies are taken on board, and within 2 days the ELLINIS is ready to leave England for the Mediterranean. Down the coast of Spain there's a brisk breeze blowing, but once past Gibraltar, the weather becomes warm and placid, true to the tradition of the Mediterranean. The English passengers seem to adjust to the ship very quickly. Perhaps, as a smug New Zealander might say, it's the novelty of unfiltered sunshine that draws them to the decks. Bingo to the English is what bowling is to the Americans, and afternoon games in the main lounge often draw high jackpots. The numbers are called out in 2 languages, English and Greek. The ELLINIS is nearing home waters. Piraeus, port of Athens, the birthplace of Western civilization. On the Acropolis stands the Parthenon, one of the world's greatest architectural masterpieces, symbolic of an age that gave birth to the gods, the essence of philosophy, and the beginnings of many centuries of creative thought and art. Back in Piraeus harbour, the ELLINIS prepares to depart once more. Some passengers have disembarked, new ones have replaced them. Many are leaving their traditional land to make their homes in Australia and New Zealand. With rather interesting equipment, a street photographer makes on-the-spot prints of souvenir photographs. Greeks are an emotional people, and for many, parting with their families and background is a time of great feeling. Passengers have absorbed a little of the feeling of a Mediterranean port, and late at night in the outrigger bar, many gather, perhaps to talk about the day's experience. This is what's known as the after-hours club. Low lights, the piano, good company. What else is needed? Right time and place to make arrangements for further on-shore excursions like the upcoming bus tour to Cairo. It's early morning as the Ellinis docks at portside, and the vendors are already on board selling everything from watches to flying carpets. But many are away on the tour to Cairo, 100 miles inland from the Suez Canal. Set in an almost unbroken surround of desert, the Suez, unlike Panama, has no locks. A narrow waterway between two great continents, it provides the setting for the mystifying illusion of the ship of the desert. Desert, and the road to Cairo. But it's not like this all the way. Here and there are patches of greenery which mark the areas where there's water, the only places where man can live in a dry land.
People pray to east side direct to Mecca. Look up please to the roof from here, you see? You want to hear the echo. Allah! Allah!
As the passengers leave the mosque, the guides wave a friendly farewell. Warmer, of course, on the size of the tip received. As always, there are the little men selling souvenirs, trinkets, and perhaps a wide variety of postcards and local medicines, not always obtainable in Western centres. The tour buses are heading across the Nile toward the pyramids of Giza, where those who feel like it can take a ride on the famous animal that's traditionally associated Late in the afternoon, the passengers return to Cairo for dinner, and then it's back to rejoin the ship at Suez. Behind them, the Sphinx regards his domain, perhaps with the mild cynicism that's the result of 5,000 years of observation of man and Three days' sail down the Red Sea is Aden, where the Ellinis has spent the night. Set in the gaunt rock formations of a giant prehistoric volcano, Aden is Britain's biggest stronghold in the Middle East and the world's largest bunkering station. A completely duty-free port, it's known as the bargain center of the world. Most of the passengers have been ashore all night in the many shops which never close whilst the ship's in port. With a bit of haggling, much has been bought here for less than half its normal price. By early morning, the ship is refueled and is setting sail on her long voyage across the Indian Ocean to Australia. On the bridge, one of the officers uses the sun to chart the ship's position. But down aft by the swimming pool, it's being used for a different purpose. A much different purpose. Some people can afford to have the sun without leaving their cabin. Just like a glass house, complete with high-class tomatoes. Whether people are working hard or just relaxing on an ocean voyage, there's one thing no one ever stops doing, growing hair. And sooner or later, depending on the individual, it's got to be cut. Next door to the barber are the facilities for any young lady who wants to look properly chic for the evening's entertainment. The ship shop is just like a miniature department store, but of course it's duty-free. Anyone who's interested can brush up on their dance steps in the lessons held in the veranda ballroom. Really quite easy. The instructor says so. The warm, placid days on the Indian Ocean are coming to a close, and the coast of Australia is just over the horizon. Some are on holiday, some returning, and some going to live for the first time in Australia and New Zealand. A short stop at Fremantle, and then it's across the Great Australian Bight to Melbourne. Many people have relatives to meet them. For others, it's the first sight of their new country. supplies, new passengers, and the Ellinis is ready to sail for Sydney, her last Australian port. Of the harbour bridge greets the Ellinis as she arrives at the second-to-last port on her regular round-the-world run. Again, there's a large influx of new passengers bound for England and Europe. Of the original passengers who embarked at Southampton and Athens, only those who are going on to New Zealand remain on board. Again, there's the excitement of the beginning of the big voyage. The noisy farewells, the streamers, the feverish activity of the ship's crew as the last piece of baggage and cargo are hauled aboard. And for the new passengers, the slight amazement at actually being away at last.
I was preparing a number of articles on the Greek islands, in fact about Greek tourism in general, when the Chandris people asked me how I'd feel about extending my tours and taking a short trip on some of their other ships. They needed some fresh literature for their brochures. So this is the story of 4 ships, and of some of the people who sail on them, and some of the places they sail to. Into Venice at sundown, and there was the FIESTA, looking most impressive. The organization was terrific. We were all shepherded aboard, sorted out, settled in, and generally cosseted, and still time to stretch our legs on deck before the evening meal. Of course, you expect first-class food, but this was very reassuring. There's always something exciting, thrilling when your ship gets underway, when for the first time you can just feel the distant heartbeat of the engines. It's like something coming to life. Somewhere below, a band had started playing, but not for me. No, not tonight. I'd already put in for an early call. Morning broke, full of promises, soon enough to be fulfilled. After breakfast, most of us started milling around, looking over the ship, looking for people we'd met the night before, looking for our bathing things, trying out the fruit cocktails, trying out the sun. Nothing much in the way of deck games yet, except a bit of trap shooting in the afternoon. Yet oddly enough, I was hungry as a horse when the first chimes went for dinner. That evening there was a general movement towards the nightclub. The captain and his staff soon got things going, and by midnight you could say that the ship was gelling fast. tackle on at daybreak, and after breakfast, a lot of us went off to see Olympia, birthplace of the games. Sometimes it seems a miracle that the high ideals of sportsmanship which they established here have managed to survive. I wonder what they would think about it all, those ancient athletes, if they knew. The Piraeus, great port of Athens, and now 4 Chandris tours to choose from. But first I had to taxi into Athens to find the store. This used to be the marketplace when Athens was still young. It's a museum now. Restored, of course. In fact, rebuilt. But my goodness, what a perfect piece of architecture. And the Acropolis. By now I'd read and heard so much about the place I really half expected to be disappointed. But oh no, not on your life. There's a kind of grandeur here that simply defies description and makes a mockery of words. And most of all, at sunset. Much later, I got caught up with a party from the ship hitting the night spot. I do wish someone had warned me about ouzo. Stuff tastes so innocuous. It didn't help me at all when they dropped anchor off Delos. Delos, an island sacred to the ancient Greeks. Here, in Hellenic times, there lived a great and cultured people, but their wealth attracted predators who came well-armed to pillage and to plunder. Defenseless as they were against attack, the unhappy inhabitants either fled or perished. Today, the archaic lion stands sentinel among the ruins. For still invaders come, though armed with nothing much more lethal than a camera. To hear the ancient tale, now told in many tongues. And every spring, the wildflowers spread their blossoms on the tombstones of a vanished race. Yet, just an hour or so away, Mykonos, most beautiful perhaps of all the islands in the group. A place of light and laughter, a friendly, hospitable place. Even the pelican is friendly. The little harbor shops have much to offer, and at tempting prices. You can even take a windmill home. They come in all sizes. The days were hot and sunny now, so naturally the swimming pool became the social center, while we steamed due north to Istanbul. It was about that time we had the fancy dress ball. Night. Did Miss Fiesta for her charm, and Queen Fiesta for her beauty, and of course Mr. Fiesta, just to give the girls a chance to vote. Istanbul, busy, bustling city on the bottoms, where they use the ferries the way we use the underground, and with little less discomfort. But for the visitor, a place of fascinating interest. For here, the powers of Christianity and Islam met head-on for centuries before they finally agreed to differ. And the treasures of the Seraglio, a golden throne with 23,000 match pearls, or was it 25,000? I don't suppose the Sultan counted them. A diamond put away in solitary confinement. No, for our money, it was the bazaar where they say you can buy anything from a balloon to a belly dancer. Alabaster, certainly, and sandals by the score. Jewelry of every kind, oriental baubles, priceless carpets, inexpensive rugs. Of course, you're supposed to haggle, It's half the fun. And if you aren't in any hurry, you might even win half the battle. As it was, I had to get on, back to the docks, to join the flagship of the fleet, Regina. 11,000 tons of her. That's quite a ship. Big enough to get lost in. Just small enough to be intimate. That night there was the captain's cocktail party and a monumental buffet. The party started quietly enough. But by midnight, goodness me, you couldn't even hear an inhibition drop. However, for those of us who like to take things more sedately, there was always the bouzouki room. Maybe in our middle age we lacked the speed, but I'll back our stamina against the youngsters anytime. Later in the morning we reached Kusarasi, the port of Ephesus. We visited the temple of Diana, fourth wonder of the world, and Ephesus itself, where St. John preached the gospel and wrote the great epistle. And Patmos, too, imprinted by St. John. The monastery, once fortified, is peaceful now and wonderfully serene. Then Santorini and Fira with its dazzling cathedral. The little town hangs on the mountainside like some strange habitat, a happy accident of architecture. And Chios, a large and rugged island of rare beauty, birthplace of Homer, and home now of the Chandris family. High up on Mount Privatium, still shrouded in the morning mist, the monastery of Niamoni. These little sheep went to market, and we went on to Crete, where I left Regina at her anchorage to join my third ship, the Fantasia. But first, a trip to Knossos, where the Minoans lived. 5,000 years ago, they say. They must have been a gracious, cultured people. True, they worshipped the sacred bull, but they must have worshipped beauty, too. What architects, with their split-level dwellings, water-cooled staircase, even a kind of central heating and drainage, still modern by many standards. And just look at these wine jars, 8 or 9 feet tall. Who could make them now? Of course, their roads weren't built for traffic, like the one back to the harbor, but incidentally, isn't this a splendid way to wait for the bus? You almost hope it'll be late. Back in Heraklion, just time now to buy a parting souvenir, and we're on our way with a friendly toot to Regina as we pass. Farewell, Regina. I'll meet you here again in 2 weeks' time. Fantasia's a smaller ship, of course, just half the tonnage or thereabouts, and hardly as impressive. But what a happy, hospitable ship she is. Same friendly service, And the food's as good as any. Light-hearted is the word. And for the more romantically inclined, the Dolce Vita Club. And so we sailed to Alexandria and Cairo, where they really did us proud in the splendid New El Borg Hotel beside the Nile. The afternoon was hot and humid, but the mosques were cool and quietly impressive. And for anyone interested in comparative religion, to have an Eastern holy man extol the virtues of Christianity in a Cairo mosque, well, that is an experience not easily dismissed. By the time we got back to the city center, it was getting on for dusk, and soon the quick tropic night set in. Dawn over the Nile is worth an early call, and soon we were on our way again, on some 30 miles, back 3,000 years, to Memphis, home now of Ramesses II and of the little alabaster Sphinx. Of course, we played the tourist game. Can you blame us? And the little Sphinx just smiled, and who could blame her either, come to that. So to the pyramids, starting with the oldest, the strange step pyramid of Zoser. And where there are pyramids, there are camels. So, after a bit of haggling and a lot of help, we were off. Or rather, we were on. Well, certainly, up. You get quite a view from the hump of a camel. Like the top of a bus, only much more fun. There's something very odd about the great pyramids of Giza. The closer you get to them, the more improbable they become. And by the time you can actually touch them, they're almost beyond belief. It's all very disturbing. So we just left them where they were and cameled back to lunch at Mina House, where we wandered in the sweet-scented gardens, pretending we were millionaires. We sailed from Alexandria at sundown, and in a way it was just like coming home. Reassuring somehow, and a whole unbroken day at sea ahead of us, to catch up on our calories. All the way to Piraeus and Romantica. She's the smallest of the fleet, but oh, what a little honey. Well, after all, she was a royal yacht. Ample decks up top and luxury below. An enormous swimming pool. We were just settling down after lunch when... lifeboat drill. Maritime regulations, of course, but in an odd sort of way, a splendid icebreaker, too. After all, a life jacket doesn't leave much room for dignity. An hour later, we were anchored outside Idra. Like Mykonos, the harbour is a haven of delight, and the visitor is welcomed here, but never fleeced. Like so many of the islands, it seems to say, come, stay a while, you're welcome here. And true enough, we were sorry to take our leave. Maybe that's why the staff captain thought it might cheer things up a bit if he brought the band up on deck. He was right. Led now by the captain, it was on with the dance. evening under the stars and a day in the sun. That night we had the traditional captain's dinner, a gay affair of paper hats and sumptuous food, and wine for all who wished it. Of course, this kind of thing leads to more of this kind of thing, and with the ballroom only a few hundred feet away, well... it was when we finally packed up, but it's hardly surprising that when we stopped at Mykonos next morning, a lot of us headed straight for St. Stephen's plage to recuperate. And what a perfect place to do it, too. Beautiful. Beautiful. But now I got to change ships again. Back to Fantasia. I must say they really had me organized. I was sorry to leave Romantica. It really was love at first sight. Oh well, it's easy to be fickle when another love is waiting.